The millionaire discovered the truth about her secretary and couldn't continue. Don't leave this video and discover the shocking outcome of this story. Catherine Mitchell was the epitome of success. At 42, she was a respected and admired businesswoman, owner of one of the largest cosmetic companies in the United States. Her journey to the top hadn't been easy, but Catherine had overcome countless obstacles with determination and vision. Her company, Mitchell Beauty, was the materialization of her dreams. Every product line, every ad campaign, every strategic partnership carried her personal stamp. It was an achievement she had always been proud of, built with her own hands. In addition to her brilliant career, Catherine seemed to have the perfect personal life. Married to David for 15 years, she believed she had found the perfect balance between work success and happiness at home. David was charming, a soft-spoken man who had supported her since the beginning of her career. Though he wasn't directly involved in the business, he always showed interest and offered advice whenever she needed it. For Catherine, he was the steady anchor that kept her grounded, the silent strength that balanced her hectic life. In the corporate environment, Catherine had always been known for her firm leadership, but also for her respect for her employees. She believed that her company's success came from her team, and for that reason, she treated every member with care and gratitude. A perfect example of this trust was Sarah, her secretary. Sarah Thompson was 30 years old and had been by Catherine's side for 5 years. During that time, Sarah proved to be more than just an assistant. She was someone Catherine trusted completely. Always efficient, Sarah not only managed Catherine's schedule but also helped handle personal matters, such as organizing dinners and important events. Catherine admired Sarah's dedication and felt a personal connection with her. It was almost as if she saw Sarah as a younger sister. On many occasions, Catherine would share confidences with Sarah, discussing her insecurities in business and even small details about her marriage with David. Sarah, for her part, always showed loyalty, listening attentively and offering discreet advice when necessary. Despite all her success and the trust she had placed in her team, Catherine knew the business world was ruthless. She was always alert, meticulously analyzing the company's finances and keeping her circle of trust small. However, in recent months, she had been feeling a slight discomfort, a vague sense that something was off. It was like a gray cloud hovering on the horizon, hard to explain but impossible to ignore. Still, she brushed those feelings aside, attributing them to the natural stress of leading such a large empire. David, though still present in her life, had begun to pull away in recent times. He was traveling more frequently, claiming professional commitments or saying he needed time for himself. Catherine, absorbed by her company's responsibilities, didn't question it much. She believed their marriage was strong enough to withstand occasional distances. Besides, David always returned with gifts and sweet words, which eased her momentary worries. However, Catherine noticed something different in Sarah's behavior. In recent months, her secretary seemed more reserved, her responses more curt, and there was a tension in the air whenever they were together. Catherine didn't want to be paranoid. After all, everyone had personal problems, and maybe Sarah was just going through a tough time. Catherine even asked if something was wrong, but Sarah always denied it, saying everything was fine. Still, Catherine couldn't completely shake off the small signs. Every now and then, she noticed Sarah and David exchanging quick glances, or Sarah disappearing for hours to handle business matters. Catherine dismissed these thoughts as the product of her tired mind. She had more important things to worry about, like expanding her brand internationally and leading new negotiations with high-profile investors. Catherine believed her life was perfectly balanced. She had a loving husband by her side and a secretary she trusted blindly. She was in control of her company and her destiny. However, the shadow of doubt was silently growing, and she didn't yet know that her trust in both Sarah and David was about to be shattered in a devastating way. What Catherine couldn't predict was that her perfect life was a fragile illusion, and that her downfall was much closer than she imagined. As the weeks passed, the feeling of discomfort looming over Catherine began to intensify. Small details that once seemed insignificant now weighed heavily on her mind. It was as if something or someone was slowly destabilizing the balance in her life. Although Catherine tried to convince herself that it was just accumulated stress, she couldn't ignore the increasingly evident signs. David, her husband, started spending even more time away from home. He claimed that work trips had become more frequent and necessary, but his explanations were vague. "You know how the market is right now, Kath," he'd say casually, always with a disarming smile. "I need to be there to maintain partnerships, and that takes time." Catherine had always trusted him, but something about his demeanor felt different. The emotional distance between them grew, and when he was home, the moments were marked by an uncomfortable, almost awkward silence. On the other hand, Sarah had also changed her behavior. Catherine had always been a person attentive to details, and now she was picking up on nuances she hadn't noticed before. The secretary, once a reassuring and always efficient presence, started to show different attitudes. The glances that Sarah exchanged with David, once subtle, now seemed longer, almost complicit. Catherine wondered if it was just her imagination, but these moments seemed to accumulate, forming a pattern she could no longer ignore. One incident in particular deepened Catherine's doubts. During an important meeting with the company's directors, Sarah made a mistake while providing financial information. It wasn't a serious error, but for someone as meticulous as Sarah, it was notable. "Sorry, Catherine," Sarah said, visibly uncomfortable. "I must have mixed up some reports." Catherine felt that something was wrong. It was unlike Sarah to be careless, and the businesswoman began to wonder if this change in behavior was related to a bigger problem she hadn't yet realized. Additionally, the company's finances began to show small discrepancies. Incorrect invoices, unexpected expenses, contracts reviewed in strange ways. All issues that, in isolation, seemed like mere coincidences or human error. However, when analyzed together, these errors painted a worrying picture. Catherine, always vigilant about her finances, began personally reviewing all the reports. It was strange. As the owner of an empire, she had several layers of management and auditing, but something in her instinct urged her to look more closely. During this closer review, Catherine found a series of transactions that didn't make sense. There were considerable amounts being transferred to external accounts she didn't recognize. She questioned her financial team, but no one could explain exactly how or why these funds were being moved. Catherine felt her stomach turn. Was someone embezzling money from the company? Could Sarah, her trusted confidant, be involved? Or was it David, her husband, responsible for these discrepancies? These doubts gnawed at Catherine. She tried to maintain a facade of control, but her nights were now marked by insomnia and growing anxiety. It was as if, for the first time in years, she was losing her grip on her own life. Everyone around her seemed to be acting normally, but she felt as though she was being betrayed by someone very close. This betrayal, still vague and unformed, was an invisible weight that followed her into every meeting, every dinner with David, and even the routine conversations with Sarah. In an attempt to dispel her suspicions, Catherine decided to discreetly confront David. During a dinner, she casually asked about his recent trips, trying to sound as relaxed as possible. David, however, responded vaguely, steering the conversation toward other topics. "Are you okay, Kathy?" he asked with a concerned expression that felt insincere to her. "You seem tired. Maybe we should take a vacation when all this calms down." The suggestion of a vacation, though tempting, seemed more like a way to divert her attention. Sarah, meanwhile, was also becoming more evasive. She began taking longer breaks during the workday and frequently left the office to handle external matters, which had never been so common before. Catherine, still reluctant to fully distrust her secretary, started paying more attention to Sarah's behavior. One afternoon, she noticed that Sarah spent a long time on the phone, speaking in whispers and hanging up quickly whenever Catherine approached. This only deepened her suspicions. The breaking point came when Catherine, by chance, passed by Sarah's office and overheard her name mentioned in a phone conversation. The door was slightly ajar, and Catherine, without announcing herself, heard Sarah say, "Don't worry, everything's under control. Catherine doesn't suspect a thing." Those words echoed in her mind, and Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't confront Sarah at that moment, but what she heard left her in a state of high alert. Suddenly, all the small signs, the glances between Sarah and David, the financial discrepancies, the evasive behavior, started to make sense. The suspicions Catherine had tried so hard to dismiss turned into a disturbing certainty. Something very serious was happening around her, and she was at the center of a plot she had yet to fully uncover. Now Catherine knew she had to act carefully. What once seemed like paranoia or stress was revealing itself to be the beginning of a large-scale betrayal. The question was, who was behind it all? And how far would this conspiracy go to bring her down? The sense of betrayal that had been eating away at Catherine for the past few months finally reached its breaking point. What had once seemed like a vague unease had transformed into a concrete and overwhelming anguish. The pivotal moment that would change her life forever happened as unexpectedly as it was brutal. One afternoon, Catherine was in her office, immersed in reviewing financial reports and attending meetings with directors about upcoming product launches. The office environment was as busy and hectic as always, with teams rushing to meet deadlines and resolve last-minute issues. Sarah, as usual, seemed completely absorbed in her tasks, answering calls and managing Catherine's schedule. But despite Sarah's apparent calm, Catherine's growing suspicion of her secretary lingered. She knew something was wrong, and instinctively she felt the pieces were beginning to fall into place. As she distractedly glanced over the investment reports passing across her desk, her phone buzzed. It was a message from David, but before she could open it, another notification popped up. A message from Sarah, apparently meant for David. Catherine looked at her phone, confused. Why was Sarah openly messaging David? When she opened the message, her breath caught for a moment. The content was disturbing, a mix of words and emojis that indicated intimacy. I can't wait to see you later. I miss you. Catherine couldn't believe what she was seeing. She tried to rationalize the message in front of her, but a wave of disbelief and anger consumed her. She wondered if it could be a mistake, a message sent to the wrong person. But deep down, she knew that wasn't the case. The instinct she had been ignoring for so long was now screaming at her. Something terrible was happening. Still in shock, Catherine decided to act. Driven by the need to know the truth, she did something she never imagined she would do. She picked up David's phone, which was in the office. He had left it on a table beside the conference room, distracted by a video meeting. She knew it was an invasion of privacy, but at that moment, Catherine felt she had no choice. Fear and suspicion had become unbearable. With trembling hands, she unlocked David's phone and began scrolling through his messages. Her heart raced with every tap on the screen, and with each conversation that didn't seem suspicious, a small sense of relief washed over her, until she found what she was looking for. A long string of messages between David and Sarah appeared on the screen. The content hit her like a punch in the stomach. David and Sarah had been together for months, maybe longer. The messages revealed secret meetings, romantic plans, and an intimacy that made her feel sick. Worse still, interspersed with the personal conversations, there were discussions about how they were planning to undermine Catherine's decisions at the company. David seemed to be manipulating financial decisions, while Sarah was leaking confidential information. They were conspiring to take control of Mitchell Beauty, slowly removing Catherine from power and eventually destroying her authority. Catherine felt the ground collapse beneath her. The pain of the emotional betrayal was enough to destroy her, but discovering that her husband and her secretary, the two people she trusted most, were plotting to ruin her professionally as well was devastating. Her mind seemed unable to process everything at once. How was this possible? How had she not noticed before? Her entire reality was crumbling in front of her eyes. David, the man with whom she had shared 15 years of her life, in whom she had placed so much love and trust, was having an affair with Sarah, the woman Catherine viewed almost as a sister. Sarah, whom she had helped grow within the company, wasn't just destroying her marriage. She was plotting to steal everything Catherine had built. The sense of violation was unbearable. She read and reread the messages, feeling as though her heart was being ripped from her chest with every word. The evidence was undeniable. They hadn't just betrayed her emotionally, they were prepared to destroy her financially. Catherine was known for her strength and intelligence, but in that moment, she felt utterly powerless. They had taken advantage of her trust, her kindness, and were ready to make her their victim, driven by their own selfish ambitions. Trapped between shock and pain, Catherine had to leave the office. She could barely breathe, feeling the world around her spinning. Her vision blurred, the words from the messages still echoing in her mind. She hurried out without saying a word to anyone, driving aimlessly around the city, tears streaming uncontrollably down her face. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? How had her perfect life turned into a nightmare in a matter of minutes? That night, Catherine couldn't bring herself to return home. The mansion she shared with David, once a refuge, now felt like a place of betrayal, a symbol of her pain. She checked into a hotel, unsure of what to do next. The idea of facing David and Sarah at that moment was unbearable. She needed time to process everything, to understand how her life had taken such a dark turn. Over the next several hours, Catherine replayed every moment from the past few months. Every smile from Sarah, every kiss from David, now seemed false, part of a grand performance. She wasn't sure if she could face it all alone. The weight of the double betrayal, both emotional and professional, was almost too much to bear. Catherine, once so strong and unshakable, felt utterly broken. The only thing she knew for sure was that her life would never be the same. She was faced with a painful choice: to succumb to the pain and let them destroy her completely, or find the strength to fight back. But at that moment, with her heart shattered and her spirit devastated, Catherine couldn't yet envision what her future would hold. After the devastating discovery, Catherine felt completely lost. The pain of the betrayal was like poison running through her veins, paralyzing her emotionally and mentally. She had spent the previous night in a hotel room, unable to return to the mansion she shared with David. Her thoughts were disorganized, chaotic, and the feeling of humiliation and helplessness overwhelmed everything. At dawn, Catherine tried to pull herself together. She called the hotel reception and asked to extend her stay indefinitely. She didn't have the strength to go back to the office or to face David or Sarah. She knew that eventually she would have to confront reality, but for now, all she wanted was to disappear. Her mind kept replaying the details of the messages she had read the night before. Every word, every plan made behind her back was a blow to her self-esteem and her ability to trust. For the first few days, Catherine isolated herself from the world. She didn't respond to emails or answer the numerous phone calls she received from the office, from David, or from Sarah. All of them, of course, pretended to be concerned, but she knew that behind the facade, David and Sarah were probably wondering what she had found out. Catherine knew they wouldn't stop until they had taken full control of her company. The anger boiled inside her, but the pain was still too strong for her to act. Her energy was drained, and all she could do was sink deeper into her sadness. She spent long days and nights in that hotel room, reflecting on everything that had happened. She couldn't eat properly, and her mind constantly betrayed her, returning to the memories of the moments she had spent with David, now increasingly distorted by the revelation of his infidelity. She thought of Sarah, remembering the conversations they had over the years, the trust she had placed in her. Sarah was like a younger sister to Catherine, someone to whom she had entrusted not only professional responsibilities, but also personal secrets. Now that seemed like a cruel irony. David's betrayal hurt the most. Catherine had believed that despite their ups and downs, they had a solid marriage, something rare in the business world. She repeatedly asked herself what had gone wrong. What hadn't she seen? When had things started to fall apart without her noticing? The feeling of failure in her marriage, combined with the professional betrayal, was an emotional burden too heavy to carry. After several days of absence, her company began to feel the effects. The directors, worried, tried to contact her several times, but Catherine couldn't bring herself to respond. With every missed call, she felt a tightening in her chest. Her company, her greatest achievement, was now under threat. Sarah and David were clearly in a position to take control of Mitchell Beauty, and she knew that without her presence, the two would move quickly to solidify their plans. In her state of despair, Catherine began to question her own abilities. How had such a successful, intelligent woman allowed her life to be so manipulated? The confidence she once had in herself and in her leadership was in ruins. For the first time in years, Catherine doubted her own strength. She looked at herself in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her face, once marked by confidence and determination, was now pale. Her eyes red from sleepless nights and constant crying. She was no longer the same, and this realization destroyed her even more. The emotional isolation also distanced her from her closest friends. Catherine had always maintained a relatively private personal life, with only a few true friends. But those people were worried about her. Some tried to reach out, but she avoided all calls, feeling incapable of sharing her pain. The shame of having been betrayed, deceived, and manipulated was greater than her desire to seek help. The thought that her personal and professional life was crumbling filled her with humiliation. How could she admit to others that the unshakable woman, who had built an empire, had been betrayed by her own husband and her trusted secretary? Desperation grew with each passing day. Catherine knew she needed to react, but she didn't have the energy to do so. David and Sarah were undoubtedly moving forward with their plans, making decisions within the company, while she remained absent. They were likely using her lack of action as an excuse to justify their interference. The fear of losing everything she had built, combined with the personal pain, created a spiral of self-destruction. She sank even deeper when she started to realize that Sarah and David were gaining ground in the company. Several internal emails began circulating among the directors, signed by Sarah on behalf of Catherine. The company she had founded with such effort now seemed to be slipping from her grasp. She couldn't believe she had allowed two traitors to gain so much control. With her head spinning and her body exhausted, Catherine felt she was on the verge of hitting rock bottom. The abyss of defeat seemed closer with each passing day. She felt powerless in the face of the manipulation happening behind the scenes. Her absence was being used against her, and the company that was her legacy was about to fall into the hands of two people who had no right to be in power. However, while she was sinking into her despair, something inside her began to change. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but over time it started to grow. Perhaps it was pure survival instinct. Perhaps it was the fact that Catherine had never been the type of person to accept defeat without a fight. She began to realize that if she didn't act soon, she would lose everything. Not just her company, but herself, her strength, and everything she had built over the years. The turning point came with an unexpected call. A longtime friend who had always stood by her in the toughest moments finally managed to get in touch with Catherine after days of silence. Her friend, unaware of all the details, knew something serious was happening. Without mincing words, she told Catherine that she couldn't afford to drown in her sorrow, that the strong and determined woman everyone knew was still there, even if Catherine couldn't see it at the moment. Those words, though simple, began to awaken something in Catherine. A spark of anger, and perhaps a will to fight, started to flicker. At that moment, Catherine realized she was on the brink of losing not just her company, but herself. It was time to make a choice: stay trapped in her pain, or find the strength to rise again and fight. The road ahead still seemed long and painful, but something inside her knew that the time to remain paralyzed was over. The woman who had been sinking into despair was slowly beginning to emerge. And although a difficult journey still lay ahead, Catherine knew the time for inaction had ended. Catherine spent the following days in a quiet process of rebuilding. Still staying at the hotel, she began to carefully plan her next steps. The pain of betrayal was still there, deep and constant. But now something was different. A flame of determination reigniting inside her. Catherine knew she couldn't let herself be defeated, that her life and her company were too valuable to be destroyed by David and Sarah. Although she still felt fragile, there was something unshakable in her will to fight. The first step was to regain control over herself. For days, she forced herself to get out of bed and reconnect with who she was before all the tragedy. She started taking care of herself again, eating properly, doing light exercises to keep her body moving, and spending hours in silence, reflecting on her journey to that point. Catherine knew she would need physical and mental strength for what was to come. Once she found some balance, she decided to act. The time for sitting in the dark, doing nothing, was over. Catherine picked up her phone and called her trusted friend, the one who had shaken her awake days earlier. Laura, an old business partner and confidant, was a woman just as powerful and determined, someone who understood exactly how the corporate world worked. Without hesitation, Laura rushed to meet Catherine at the hotel, and the two spent hours talking about everything that had happened, from the personal betrayals to the attempts to seize control of the company. Catherine opened up to Laura, revealing the details of the messages she had found between David and Sarah, and how they were conspiring against her. Laura was horrified, but not surprised. People like that are driven by greed, Laura said firmly. They take advantage of our blind spots, our trust, to try to bring us down. But you can't let that happen, Kath. This company is yours. Your legacy. They may have caught you off guard, but now you're in control. They underestimated who you really are. Laura's words echoed in Catherine's mind. She knew that her strength had always come from her intelligence and strategic thinking. Even though the betrayal had shattered her emotionally, Catherine's calculating and sharp side was still intact. She knew she couldn't handle this situation impulsively. She needed to be cautious and think ahead of David and Sarah. If they were plotting to bring her down, she needed to turn the tables, expose them, and regain control of her company once and for all. The first step in doing that was to regain control of the financial operations. Catherine knew this was the area where David and Sarah were manipulating things, preparing to push her out of the company. With Laura's help, who had influential contacts in the financial world, Catherine discreetly hired an external auditor whom she could completely trust. She wanted a deep investigation into all the financial movements over the last few months, especially those involving large sums of money being transferred to external accounts. While waiting for the audit results, Catherine returned to the office for the first time in weeks. Her arrival surprised the team, who hadn't seen her in a long time. Sarah, with her fake smile, tried to hide her discomfort at Catherine's presence. "It's so good to have you back, Catherine. We were all worried about you," Sarah said, forcing a tone of concern that now sounded ridiculous to Catherine. David, for his part, was also visibly unsettled. He tried to maintain the posture of a worried husband, but Catherine could see through the facade. Anger boiled inside her, but she restrained herself. This wasn't the time to confront them directly. There was something more powerful in remaining calm while preparing her counterattack. The less they suspected her plans, the more she could act in the shadows, just as they had done to her. In the following days, Catherine resumed some of her duties at the helm of the company, attending important meetings and reinforcing her presence among the directors. She knew David and Sarah were uncomfortable with her return, but they couldn't show it openly. Both tried to act as if nothing had happened, and Catherine maintained the facade as well. But now her eyes were wide open to every move they made. The audit reports came back quickly. What they revealed was even worse than Catherine had imagined. David and Sarah weren't just trying to take control of the company. They had embezzled large sums of money into their own accounts, hiding their transactions behind contracts and shady deals. They planned to destroy Catherine's image in front of the board and shareholders, creating a scenario where it looked like she had been neglecting the company's interests. With the evidence in hand, Catherine knew the next step would be crucial. She had to be meticulous and strategic in exposing the pair without giving them time to react. Laura helped her organize the evidence carefully, making sure every document and transaction was properly traced. Catherine was ready to bring them down, but before taking any public action, she wanted Sarah and David to know that their game was over. On a rainy morning, Catherine called David and Sarah for a private meeting in her office. The two entered, unaware of what to expect, but Catherine could see the tension in their eyes. Without hesitation, she placed the audit documents on the table. "I believe you both know exactly what this is," Catherine said in a calm but relentless tone. David tried to speak, but Catherine raised her hand to stop him. "I know everything," she continued. "I know about your affair. I know about the money you've stolen, and I know about your plan to destroy me. But you underestimated the wrong person." Her voice was cold but firm. "You thought you could take everything from me, that you could destroy me and take my company. But you were wrong. Mitchell Beauty is mine, and nothing will change that." David and Sarah sat in silence, visibly shaken by the confrontation. They knew there was no escaping the accusations in front of them. Catherine didn't give them time to respond. "You have two choices. You can leave peacefully, and I won't make a public scene, or I can take this to the board and the police, and you will face all the legal and public consequences of your actions. Decide." Sarah, her face pale and eyes wide with fear, tried to apologize, but Catherine ignored her. David, for his part, knew the game was over. He tried to keep his composure, but couldn't hide the desperation. Catherine, now in complete control of the situation, waited for their decision. They knew they were cornered. They had no choice but to walk away quietly, without causing more damage. Catherine, despite the personal pain she still felt, experienced a sense of justice. The strength that had been shattered by the betrayal now returned with full intensity. She had not only regained her company, but also her dignity and control over her own life. What Catherine didn't know at that moment was that this experience would change her forever. The woman who had been betrayed and underestimated was reborn stronger and wiser, ready to start anew but never forgetting the harsh lessons life had taught her. With David and Sarah cornered, the sense of relief mixed with the desire to close this painful chapter of Catherine's life once and for all. She knew that although she had won this battle, the path to complete recovery, emotionally, professionally, and personally, would still be long. However, the feeling of regaining control over her life brought a renewed strength, a sense of liberation she hadn't felt in months. After the tense meeting, David and Sarah left the office visibly defeated. They tried to keep their composure, but their defeat was written all over their faces. They chose to leave quietly, as Catherine had proposed, avoiding the scandal and legal consequences that could have publicly ruined their reputations. For Catherine, this victory was bittersweet but necessary. The idea of completely exposing them was still tempting, but her priority now was protecting her company and moving forward. With David and Sarah gone, Catherine assumed full control of Mitchell Beauty. She knew there was a lot of work to be done to restore the confidence of the directors and employee. In the months that Sarah and David had conspired against her, the internal structure of the company had been compromised. Some financial and operational decisions would need to be reversed and fixed. But Catherine was never one to shy away from challenges. And now, with her confidence restored, she was determined to rebuild her company more carefully than ever. At the first board meeting following Sarah and David's departure, Catherine called an extraordinary session with the directors. She knew that to regain the trust of the investors and shareholders, she needed to be transparent and decisive. In the meeting, she explained that she had identified several financial irregularities and questionable strategic decisions without delving into personal details. She presented the evidence of embezzlement and fraud, but reassured them that, under her leadership, the company would return to its path of success. Her speech was direct, professional, and was met with respect from the board members. In the days that followed, Catherine began implementing a series of reforms within the company. She restructured teams, brought in new trusted professionals for strategic positions, and established new auditing procedures to ensure that nothing like what Sarah and David had done could ever happen again. These changes were necessary, not only to protect the company, but also to show everyone that Mitchell Beauty was in the capable hands of its rightful founder. Although professional recovery was a priority, Catherine knew she also needed to heal emotionally. David's betrayal still hurt deeply. He had been her partner for more than a decade, someone she had loved and trusted with all her heart. Now, with him out of her life, Catherine was facing the echoes of that pain, but with a new perspective. It was time to rediscover herself beyond any relationship. Catherine decided that she needed a break. 1 month after fully reclaiming control of the company, she took some time off to reflect and reconnect with herself. She went to a secluded country house where she could think without the distractions of corporate life. There, surrounded by nature and silence, she began reflecting on the lessons she had learned. In the first few days, Catherine felt the weight of solitude. She was still processing everything that had happened, and there were moments when sadness and anger came rushing back. But at the same time, she felt something inside her changing. The pain was no longer the protagonist of her life. It was being slowly replaced by a sense of peace, acceptance, and above all, resilience. During her time alone, Catherine began to write, not about business, but about her emotional journey, her reflections on trust, power, and self-overcoming. She wrote down her thoughts on what it meant to be a woman in a world where so many people try to take advantage of vulnerability. Over time, these writings became a form of therapy, helping her process the pain and channel it into something constructive. This process of self-discovery brought forth a new Catherine, a woman who, though wounded, was stronger than ever. The betrayal she had suffered had indeed changed her, but she decided she wouldn't let that pain define her. Instead, Catherine chose to define herself by the strength with which she overcame adversity and by the way she rose from the ashes. When she returned to the city, Catherine was ready for the next chapter of her life. She began attending events and giving talks on entrepreneurship, sharing her experience not only as a businesswoman, but also as someone who had overcome one of the most painful betrayals a person can face. The response was overwhelming. Many women started reaching out to her, sharing their own stories of betrayal and resilience. Catherine realized that her pain wasn't unique. Many people, especially women in leadership positions, had faced similar situations. Inspired by these conversations, Catherine decided to create a foundation aimed at supporting women who face challenges in the business world. The foundation offered mentorships, legal support, and emotional counseling, helping to empower women who, like Catherine, needed to rise after facing personal and professional adversities. This project became a new passion for her, a way to transform her pain into something positive and impactful. With time, Mitchell Beauty thrived once again under her leadership. The company launched new products and expanded into new markets, reaffirming its position as a leader in the cosmetics industry. Catherine, now stronger and more aware of who she was, ran the business with renewed confidence, knowing that nothing could bring her down again. She had learned the importance of trusting herself and never underestimating her own value. The end of this journey wasn't just about revenge against those who had betrayed her, but about rebirth. Catherine had overcome the darkest time of her life and emerged a wiser, stronger woman, ready to begin anew, without ever forgetting the valuable lessons she had learned along the way. If this story has captivated you so far, it's because you were as impacted as I was by all the twists and turns that Catherine faced. Now I want to know from you, what would you have done in her place? How would you deal with such a devastating betrayal? Leave your opinion here in the comments. I'd love to know what you think. And if you like this video and want more intense stories, full of drama, overcoming, and twists, leave a like. It helps a lot. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any news. Come with us because there are many more exciting stories to come. See you in the next video.